What if the biggest betrayal inside the Soviet space program wasn't driven by greed, ambition, or hatred, but by love, loyalty, and a set of impossible choices no one could survive without breaking? Episode 3 of Star City finally answers one of the most persistent questions fans have been asking since the series premiered. Who is the mole feeding Soviet space secrets to the United States? After weeks of paranoia, suspicion, and escalating internal investigations, the truth is finally exposed. But what makes this reveal so devastating is not just who it is, but why it happened. And according to the creators, this is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of something far more dangerous. Major Episode 3 spoilers for Bad Dance ahead. From its first announcement, Star City was expected to be a straightforward expansion of the For All Mankind universe, a prequel focused on the Soviet space program and its early ambitions. But by Episode 3, it has already become something much more layered, a Cold War espionage thriller wrapped inside a psychological tragedy about loyalty, ideology, and emotional collapse under pressure. Across its early episodes, the series builds two dominant narrative engines. On the surface, we follow the expansion of the Soviet space program, led by Rhys Ifans, chief designer, whose public mission is to push humanity toward the moon while privately entertaining far more radical ambitions, most notably, a secret conceptual path toward a Venus mission. It's an idea that feels both scientifically daring and politically impossible, grounded in ambition, but constantly threatened by bureaucracy and paranoia. Underneath that, however, is a far more immediate and explosive question. Someone inside Star City is leaking classified information to the Americans. And nobody is safe from suspicion. The pressure cooker inside Star City. As Episode 3 unfolds, the internal atmosphere inside Star City becomes more suffocating with every scene. The Soviet space program is no longer just a scientific effort. It is a controlled psychological environment where fear, ambition, and loyalty constantly collide. Lyudmila Raskova becomes the emotional center of the investigation. Her suspicion is not casual, it becomes consuming. Every interaction, every delay, every inconsistency becomes evidence in her mind. She is no longer just trying to protect the program, she is trying to purify it. At the same time, Irina Morozova begins her transformation arc in full force. What the audience sees is not a sudden change, but a slow erosion. She starts as someone still capable of empathy, still capable of hesitation. But the system around her does not reward hesitation. It rewards certainty, control, and efficiency. So she adapts. And every adaptation costs her something human. Meanwhile, the fan community is doing what it always does, in a mystery-driven narrative, building theories. Every character becomes a suspect. Sasha feels too emotionally chaotic to trust. The chief designer feels too ambitious to be innocent. Even minor background figures are re-examined frame by frame. But Episode 3 is quietly constructing something far more deliberate than any of those guesses. It is teaching the audience to look in the wrong direction. The opera sequence, a perfect misdirection. One of the most structurally important scenes in Episode 3 is also one of its most deceptively quiet. The opera sequence. On the surface, it is a relationship-focused interlude. Tanya and Valya attend together, and the emotional strain between them is already visible. Their marriage has been fractured from the beginning, especially with Tanya's growing emotional entanglement with Sasha. Everything in the scene primes the audience for romantic betrayal. So when Valya suddenly disappears during the performance, the assumption is immediate and almost automatic. He is cheating. And when Tanya spots him speaking privately with a mysterious woman, that assumption becomes certainty, not just for her, but for the audience as well. This is where Star City executes one of its most effective narrative manipulations. Because the entire scene is designed around expectation bias. We interpret secrecy as romance, because that is the most emotionally familiar explanation. Tanya's own infidelity with Sasha reinforces that assumption. The show is essentially using its own emotional subplots as camouflage, but the truth is completely different. The woman is not a lover, she is a handler. And Valya is not cheating, he is working. The mole is revealed. When the reveal finally lands, it does not arrive with spectacle, it arrives with quiet inevitability. Valya is the mole. What makes this moment so effective is that it does not feel like a twist inserted for shock value. Instead, it feels like the final piece of a puzzle that has been slowly assembling itself since Episode 1. Every earlier suspicion suddenly reconfigures itself in hindsight. his emotional distance, his occasional absences, his carefully controlled reactions during crisis moments. None of it feels accidental anymore. It feels structured. But the emotional impact does not come from the revelation itself. It comes from understanding what it cost him. Luna 17, the point of no return. The revelation deepens when Valya admits his involvement in the Luna 17 incident. He is not just passing information. He actively placed the transmitter that triggered one of the season's most devastating chain reactions. That single act becomes the pivot point of multiple tragedies. Once the transmitter is discovered, panic spreads through the program, emergency protocols are activated, systems are rebooted under pressure, decisions are made rapidly, without full understanding of consequences. And then comes the irreversible outcome, the death of cosmonaut Pavel Fetisov. What makes this moment especially tragic is its structure. There is no single villainous action that causes the death. Instead, it is a cascade of reactions, each one logical in isolation but catastrophic in sequence. And at the center of it all is Valya, watching the consequences unfold in real time, not as a distant operator, but as someone forced to witness what his decisions have done. That psychological burden becomes the defining feature of his character from this point forward. A spy who doesn't feel like a spy. One of the most striking creative decisions in Star City is how it refuses to frame Valya as a conventional antagonist. He is not portrayed as someone driven by ideology against his country. He is not a greedy opportunist. He is not even emotionally detached. Instead, he is deeply, almost painfully human. According to co-creator Matt Wolpert, Valya remains a patriot. He believes in the Soviet Union. He believes in the mission. And he believes in the importance of what they are building. That is what makes him vulnerable. His betrayal is not born from rejection of his country. It is born from emotional conflict layered over ideological loyalty. This is where the series leans heavily into Russian literary influence. Themes of tragic obligation, emotional contradiction, and moral entrapment define his arc. Valya is not choosing between good and evil. He is choosing between two forms of loyalty that cannot coexist. And no matter what he chooses, something will be destroyed. The actor's advantage, knowing the ending early. Another layer that enriches Valya's performance is the behind-the-scenes structure of the show. Actor Adam Nagaitis revealed that he knew about the twist from his very first audition. This allowed him to construct Valya's emotional performance with hidden context in mind. Every hesitation, every pause, every moment of silence becomes intentional rather than incidental. Interestingly, not all cast members had this advantage. Ruby Ashbourne Serkis, who plays Tanya, later confirmed that many actors only learned the truth as scripts were distributed. This created a dual-layer performance environment, one actor building a character around a known secret, while others reacted in real time to unfolding revelations. That imbalance may have contributed significantly to the authenticity of the emotional reactions on screen. Tanya, the heart of Misunderstanding Tanya's storyline, becomes one of the most emotionally complex threads in Episode 3. From her perspective, she is the victim of marital betrayal. She believes Valya is cheating, and that belief feels justified by everything she sees. But the audience understands the irony immediately. She is wrong, but not in the way she thinks. Valya is not betraying her emotionally in the way she assumes. Instead, he is trapped in a far more dangerous system of external control and political coercion. At the same time, Tanya herself is engaged in an affair with Sasha, creating a mirror structure of misperception. Neither partner understands the full truth about the other, and that lack of understanding becomes the emotional engine of their potential collapse. The handler's warning: you're far from done. One of the most chilling moments in Episode 3 comes when Valya attempts to disengage from his handler. He expresses a desire to stop, to end the arrangement, to step away after Luna 17. But the response is immediate and final: you're far from done. This line recontextualizes everything. It implies Valya is not an independent agent. It suggests long-term leverage, deeper manipulation, and obligations that extend far beyond what has been revealed so far. And it raises several unanswered questions. What compelled Valya to agree to this arrangement in the first place? Is he being blackmailed? Is Tanya unknowingly part of the leverage being used against him? Or is there something even larger operating beneath this entire situation? The series deliberately refuses to answer these questions yet. The narrative shift from mystery to consequence. By the end of Episode 3, Star City has fundamentally changed its storytelling structure. The question is no longer who is the mole. That question is finished. The new question is far more dangerous. What happens now that we know? Because revelation does not resolve tension, it redirects it. Now every interaction involving Valya carries hidden weight. Every conversation becomes a potential risk. Every decision becomes a potential exposure point. The story is no longer about uncovering truth. It is about surviving it. The Venus program, a parallel obsession. While the spy narrative escalates, the chief designer's Venus project continues developing in the background, slowly becoming its own narrative thread of ambition and existential risk. The concept itself borders on impossible, adapting Soviet engineering principles to design a vessel capable of surviving Venus-like conditions. It is part science, part speculation, and part ideological statement. According to the creators, the idea is grounded loosely in real scientific curiosity about Venus, but amplified through the lens of Cold War ambition, where impossibility is not a limitation, but a challenge to be overcome. This parallel storyline mirrors Valya's arc in an important way. Both are pursuing dangerous truths. Both are operating under systemic pressure. And both are risking collapse in pursuit of something larger than themselves. Irina Morozova. Becoming the system, Irina's transformation continues to unfold with increasing clarity. What makes her arc compelling is that it is not driven by a single turning point. It is cumulative. She is not becoming ruthless overnight. She is becoming efficient over time. And efficiency in this world is indistinguishable from emotional detachment. Every episode strips away another layer of hesitation. Every decision forces her further into alignment with the system she serves. By Episode 3, she is already beginning to resemble the figure fans recognize from later points in the franchise timeline. Not because she chooses to become that person, but because the system leaves her no alternative.